Most people think cinematic photos come from expensive cameras, but honestly, it has very little to do with your camera. There are actually 5 principles for making cinematic images, and if you apply them, your photos will start to look more and more like scenes from a movie. So first of all, filmmaking and photography are not mutually exclusive art forms. There are actually tons of filmmaking skills and techniques that translate perfectly into photography. And once I started paying attention to this stuff, my photos have become a lot more interesting. And because I have put a lot of effort and time and attention into creating my photographs, they actually feel more uniquely mine. So I'm gonna break down 5 principles that I think play a huge role in my photography. First is composition. Does your photo guide the eye of a viewer? When I look at your photograph, what am I supposed to look at? Is it clear, the thing that is the center of attention? Or is it unclear and I don't even know what the point of the photo is? I believe a good cinematic photo doesn't just look good. It tells a story and it directs your attention. You can use leading lines, intentional framing, layers of objects in front of the lens. Every decision you make before you click that shutter determines what kind of story your photo is gonna tell. So instead of worrying too much about making your photos look good, maybe you should try to figure out what is actually important in your frame. What is the focus? What should the viewer be looking at? And what kind of idea or emotion you're trying to express with your photo? Lighting is also a big deal. I mean, photography literally means painting with light. So it's pretty obvious that you need to pay attention to light if you want to take your photography seriously. And if you're not paying attention to light, then you're not doing photography. You're doing something that is more casual. Most people just want to take a photo with their phone. Maybe they find something cute, but they don't really think about how other people are gonna perceive their images. They'll probably delete it after a few weeks because the photos don't really matter that much to them. If you're doing that kind of photography, then it's okay. You don't have to care about lighting, but if you want to take it seriously, if you want your photos to be intentional and convey a certain idea, and you want to be very intentional and specific with it, then you need to pay attention to lighting. I feel like we didn't really need that mini rant for lighting right there, but I'm not gonna cut it out. I'm gonna keep it because maybe it will emphasize how important lighting really is. So here are some basic things that you should care about or keep in mind when you're taking a photo. Flat lighting always looks boring. That is exactly the reason that I'm not facing my window, which is right here, and I'm facing the wall, and I'm letting the light hit me from the side so that it creates this dramatic effect on my face where half of it is just dark and half of it is well lit. If it was flat, it would obviously look very boring. Like if my hand is like this, it looks boring, but if my hand is like this, it looks much more interesting, and there's more dramatic shadows and lines here that you can see if the light is hitting it from the side as opposed to hitting it directly like this. That is actually a good way to demonstrate the difference between flat and good lighting, dramatic lighting, or I think they call it, I forget the exact terminology, but it looks good. That's the whole point. Okay, so when it comes to dramatic lighting, you want to shoot against the light source as much as possible, meaning you don't want your subject to be fully blasted with light. What you want is to show a good contrast between the light and the shadows. And a lot of the times, especially in movies, in cinematic situations, what you'll notice is that the face of the character is comprised of more shadows and less light. So the most dominant part, or at least half of the face, is gonna be darker, and the other half, or the less dominant part of the face, is gonna be well lit, as they say. And this play of light and shadows, it affects the entire mood of the photo. It affects how you feel about the scene, and it really makes a difference in the way you perceive a certain situation. So the next time you're taking a photo, let's say a portrait, Try to notice these things and hopefully you'll pick up on the nuances of light and shadow. The next principle is all about colors. So if you're somebody who only takes black and white photos, then you don't really have to care much about color. But I think it's still somewhat important to have a general idea of how colors play a role in photographs. I myself shoot a lot of black and white, and I really love the way black and white photos look. And sometimes, even if I really like a photo in color, I still make a colorless version of that photo just to see what it looks like and what kind of difference it makes when I'm looking at the same photo. And I think a lot of people overcomplicate their photos with colors, because colors can be very tricky, and unless you know what to look for, it's hard to figure out how to manage colors and make them look good. So an easy way to have some sort of control is to have less colors in one photo. Maybe you can try to avoid shooting too wide so that you don't pick up everything that is all around, and that helps minimize the diversity of colors. Try to stick to a similar palette. Let's say my background right here, it's mostly red and whatever this is, like beige or yellow. So I basically have two colors in this frame, which is red and yellow. I do have some purple right here and you know, a little sprinkle of other colors, but they're not too obvious, so they don't really stick out and demand attention from you, which is what you want most of the time anyway. So yeah, this wall right here is very intentional, and I try my best not to add too many opposing colors over here. So yeah, try to avoid too many colors and stick to a complementary color palette. If you want to know what complementary colors are and what colors look good with what, you can just look up any video on color theory on YouTube. So you'll get a good idea of what colors work together and what colors should never be in the same frame together. I mean, it's not a super strict rule or anything, but if you know the basics, it will help you in making decisions, especially when you want to break the rules. So yeah, managing colors can be intimidating, but if you know what you're doing, it's actually really fun. I wish you good luck with that. Let's move on to the next one. Principle number 4 is about depth. Depth is what makes a photo feel not flat. It makes it look 3D. It makes it look real, and it makes it look more interesting and filled with content and character. That is what depth does. Depth is deep. Okay, to make it more simple, think of it like this. Depth is responsible for separating your subject from the background. If you shoot directly onto a wall, more often than not, it's gonna look boring, unless you're shooting a wall that has nice graffiti on it. So let's say you place a subject leaning against a wall and try shooting two photos. One photo, you point the camera directly at the wall, and the second photo, you move a little bit to the side, point the camera at a slight angle to the wall, and then shoot a photo. And look at the difference. Which photo looks more interesting? Which photo has a better sense of depth? Which photo has a better sense of distance? And I think if you analyze the differences between the two photos, it will give you a good sense of the kind of impact that depth creates. And it's not all about the angles either. Like I mentioned before, you can use objects in the foreground to create depth, especially in situations where you're in a tight spot and you don't really have a lot of room to move around or create distance between the subject and the background. And in those situations, putting objects in the foreground becomes really, really helpful. Okay, so the last principle is actually really interesting. And I believe that this one principle is gonna set you apart from all the casual shooters. Because you see, when most people take photographs, they don't think about movement. They don't think about motion. I believe that one of the defining qualities of a cinematic photo is that it tells a story, and motion tells stories in a very interesting way. Let's say you want to capture a fast car while it's driving down the highway. If you want to create a sense of speed and you want the audience to feel like the car is going really fast, then maybe you don't want your photo to be the sharpest one that you ever took. Maybe if you move down to a slower shutter and you allow some motion blur, it will actually look like the car is going a lot faster. Or maybe let's say you're shooting a portrait on a very windy day and you want the viewer to know that it's a windy day. So maybe you want to capture the movement of your subject's hair. You want it to somehow show that there is a lot of wind and there is a lot of movement going on in that situation, in that scene. How do you do that? You go to a lower shutter number so that the image is not as sharp and crystal clear, so that there is some blurriness in the parts of the image that are actually moving. So instead of looking like you just captured a single moment, it might end up looking like a moment that is still happening. So there you go. These are the 5 principles that I think will 100% make your photos look more cinematic if you apply them correctly, that is. And I would advise you not to rush these things because it definitely takes time. I mean, I've been doing it for as long as I can remember, at least for 15 years, and I'm still learning a lot. I'm still learning new things, new techniques, new ways to deal with situations, lighting, movement, whatever it is. I'm still learning, and I'm learning every day. So it's not an overnight thing that you're gonna achieve. It's more of a process. It's more of a journey that you have to go through for probably the rest of your life, because there's always something new, there's always something you can learn, and there are always ways you can improve whatever it is that you want to do. So yeah, keep practicing and try to get some feedback from other people who also have good taste and understand any kind of art. It's always good to have some feedback and not isolate yourself and your work from the world. It's always good to have somebody like that. And none of these principles require you to have any special equipment. Just having a camera, any camera will do. Even your smartphone, if you can download an app that allows you to have some manual control over your camera, and that's still pretty good, especially compared to the default software. There's obviously a lot more you could do to take your photos to the next level, and you know, you have to go through a lot of research, a lot of studying, a lot of trial and error, which everybody goes through. Nobody starts taking good photographs from day one, right? Nobody becomes a good photographer overnight, obviously. And I believe that's true for most art forms, if not all. It just takes time, practice, and feedback. And you have to understand that it's not about getting there quickly and becoming a world-renowned photographer, but it's more about looking at the landscape and taking in all of the things that you go through while you're on the journey of learning and becoming better than you were yesterday. So yeah, those are the 5 principles that I think are most impactful in my photography, and I hope they help you in some way as well. If you're into photography or filmmaking or other artistic stuff, then you may want to consider subscribing, because I am also into filmmaking and photography and other artistic stuff. So why don't we become friends on the internet who share ideas about art? It might not be the worst thing ever. So thank you very much for sticking around till the end of this video, and depending on if you subscribe or not, I hope to see you in the next one.